Well, this is the first in a series of talks that are retakes. The original suffered a technical difficulty that should have been caught earlier. What happened is that in the fall of the year 2000, we installed a ceiling mic. It's called the choir mic. It was very sensitive, and the idea was that we were going to pick up people in the group as they were reading. And that was very fine, except that I, as the speaker, also had a lapel mic. And we didn't know what was happening, but when I was using both the lapel mic and the ceiling mic at the same time, it was producing a terrible echo, which made the recordings almost unbearable to listen to. So for about 6 or 7 talks, we're going to have to redo them. It won't be the same thing as a live talk. It'll miss that spirit, but I love the material so much that it won't be without spirit. This was the second year of working into Shakespeare, and it is still the first series, or first sub-series, called The Mysteries of Christ and Persephone. And as we were re-beginning after the summer layoff, we began with an extremely brief reintroduction. And that's where we'll start. Now, these are primarily talks about mysticism, but they are also about Shakespeare. We're appreciating, we're enjoying the poetry and the dialogue. And especially, we like seeing the development of character. These stories and the microcosmic world of the theater are also quite enjoyable. The beauty and depth of Shakespeare is awesome. So what we're doing is we're using these plays with their grand panoply of wisdom and knowledge as a springboard to leap into all sorts of different topics from a mystical perspective. We're looking at psychology, astrology, symbolism, magic, mysteries, ghostology, folklore, and many, many other things that Shakespeare takes up. We're being very careful to state clearly what is Shakespeare and what is Richard Koepsel. Actually, there's no comparison, but there is a tendency sometimes for people to piggyback on Shakespeare in order to lift themselves up. In some cases, with what we're doing, it is clear that Shakespeare knows about the mysteries and is expressing mystery lore clearly. Whether he's a mystic or not, that's another matter. But there is clearly mystery wisdom in Winter's Tale, and especially in Midsummer Night's Dream. In some cases, it's clear that he is not expressing mysticism, such as Julius Caesar. It's part of life, and it's mystical in that way, but it's not especially that way. In some cases, it's not clear where he stands on mysticism or any other subject. This overall series of talks on Shakespeare is broken into sub-series, and we are in the first sub-series. And there are major and minor themes to each play that come out of each play as we're looking at them in this current sub-series. And this current sub-series is called The Cycles of Christ and Persephone. These themes are meant to parallel ideas that we're addressing through the plays. This is why there is such a unusual choice in order of plays. It's almost certainly not what any other Shakespeare scholar would do. For this reason, it's important to note that in the parallel themes, we're not trying to put words into Shakespeare's mouth or to read something into the plays. We're trying to read something out of the plays. Now, it happened serendipitously that the Eleusinian mysteries were based on the cycle of Persephone. And so the mystical form that was the material for the Eleusinian mysteries is explicit and implicit in Midsummer Night's Dream, and to some extent it is hinted at in The Winter's Tale. The deeper cycle, or the higher parallel of the cycle of Christ, is not found in the plays. But that is one of the primary themes of these talks. It's something to first to take the plays and then to transcend to the Eleusinian mysteries outlook in a modern way, and then to transcend that to the cycle of Christ, which is a very lofty thing. Personally, I'm very thankful to Shakespeare for providing these wonderful vehicles, and they are vehicles that work so well for getting into the subject very deeply. It's really difficult to find a good vehicle, and for that reason, because I have such respect and such admiration for Shakespeare, I do not want to abuse Shakespeare or his works by arrogating acceptance or prestige or something like that from them. They stand for themselves, and they should stand for themselves. All right, so far we have worked our way through 3 of the 4 plays that we are utilizing in this subseries. First, we looked at Winter's Tale, and we looked at the parallel of it with the winter solstice and Christmas in 2 ways. One, in the ebb and flow of vital life in the earth, and one in the principle of sacrifice and new rebirth that comes from a much deeper level. Next, we used Julius Caesar as a means to understand the vernal equinox and Easter. And we looked at parallel themes in the outward expression of new life when it rises out of its dormancy in the earth. Excuse me. These things happen at the most embarrassing moments. And we looked at the concurrent release of the life spirit from the earth at the vernal equinox. And then last year we finished off with A Midsummer Night's Dream as a vehicle to understanding the summer solstice and St. John's Mass and the Ascension through mystery wisdom. We spoke of the Festival of the Fairies and the mysteries of upliftment and the mystery material that was in that play going all the way back to India and certainly in Greece, which is where the setting of the play was, and then following it into Christian mysticism. We're now ready to complete the cycle through a perusal of the autumnal equinox and the Last Judgment. The play we'll be using is Hamlet. It's an unusual but not inappropriate play for this purpose. Ancient mysteries were celebrated at the solstices more than at the equinoxes. The equinoxes were considered unsettled times. They were times of radical change, and those aren't always the best time to be celebrating eternal mysteries. In the air, even the equinoctial winds are more violent at that time. The solstices, which literally means sun stands still, the sun is at its height in ascent or descent of declination. And they're considered sort of like stopped action epitomes. They're sometimes called the gates, the northern gates and the southern gates, through which new things come into and out of manifestation. It's a very fascinating topic, but unfortunately we do not have time to go into it. The solstices are perfectly suited to extreme self-assertion for initiatory work. And they give 3-day periods of a specific spiritual climate. In the modern mysteries of our times, the deepest or the ultimate or the last of the lesser mysteries, beyond which one is no longer human but a demigod, they're celebrated only on the summer and winter solstices. So even though Hamlet is not a mysteries play per se, it is an excellent vehicle to get at the autumnal equinox. Julius Caesar described the consequences in the world of all of the instability of the early stages of external assertion. That external assertion occurred when one exercised the prerogative of divinity and setting out to rule and control the world. Unfortunately, Caesar was all too human and insufficiently divine to pull it off, but the play was still an appropriate vehicle. Now, for people who sat in the original of these classes, they recognize that this is a Richard Koepsel review. It's one of those reviews that doesn't in the least sound like the original. And that is done on purpose, because we want to become so thoroughly imbued with the fact that there are many, many sides to spiritual subjects, and that if we do our homework and do much more than what we do in these classes and in these talks, we can get much more out of such rich material. We saw that in the series of talks on mythology that preceded the Shakespeare talks. In that we covered the myth of Isis and Osiris, and we did it twice. And there were two completely different renditions, and they were separated by 5 years. We could probably go back and do another rendition that would be different than the first two. And the same is true with Shakespeare. These talks could be redone another time, and totally different material, all valid, as valid as the originals are. And it seems almost inexhaustible. Similarly, Hamlet is an excellent vehicle for the autumnal equinox, when being humbly human is the order of the day. A few years ago, we looked at hierarchy in Egyptian mythology, and we noted that the highest or the first of all the Egyptian deities was Re, and that Re had two distinct character faces. There was ray Koepsel. That was the ray of the rising sun, either at dawn or at the vernal equinox. And it was a vibrant, robust, it was a strong ray, rising in his creative glory to his dominion on high. And he rose on the horns of a scarab, a dung beetle that was pushing him upward. The scarab was the symbol of the soul's mystic fertility that produces all of these insights or all of the facets to reality that we experience. And it is, the scarab, like all beetles, is ruled by Cancer, which is entered at midsummer when the sun has climbed to its highest declination. Atom ray was the ray of the setting sun, or of the evening, or of the autumnal equinox. Atom ray was thoroughly human, measured, humble, accepting of the impending darkness of night or winter, and the concomitant death and disorder. Because of this, Atom was ray incarnate, facing death in the underworld, and as such was perfectly suited to rule by being human, understanding the human condition. Hamlet is just such a person, filled with and facing uncertainty, as Atom ray was, and Hamlet is facing uncertainty within and without, and he's aware of all of his very human frailties and the inconsistency and his vibrating between his options and his responsibilities, and in that vibration shirking. Hamlet is a very modern play. It is perhaps most suitable to the contemporary mind of all of the Shakespeare plays. And the mental character of Hamlet, along with the dilemmas he faces, are very much his own, and they're very much like our dilemmas. When Caesar sought divinity and tried to ascend like Koepsel or Koepsel ray, Hamlet has it thrust on him, and he struggles with the responsibilities involved in accepting his place in the cosmos, very much like Atom ray. He is of a mental nature, like us, with his head so far ahead of his heart and his inspiration that the mind sways in doubt and indecision and even depression like our contemporary humanity. The door of death as a consequence of action and as the gateway to an uncertain immortality is not an easy portal to face. I, and probably all of the rest of us, will find the characters easy to relate to in Hamlet, much more than in something like Winter's Tale. Studying the play in fall, as the original was studied, makes it even more relevant and more appropriate to our lives. This play was studied all fall and even then some. We begin with the reading that we do, which is not everything. Eventually we did evolve in these courses to the point where we did read everything, but we grew up doing these classes together and we had a great time. We learned, we shared reading, and we evolved the way things were presented as we went along. Obviously, we begin at Act 1 and Scene 1. And it is on one of the guard platforms on the walls of the Elsinore Castle, the castle of the King of Denmark. Two guards are Bernardo and Francisco, and they meet at the changing of the guard. Bernardo bids Francisco good night and tells him that if he sees Marcellus and Horatio, who are to share the watch with him, that they should make haste. At that moment, Marcellus and Horatio enter. Everyone exchanges greetings and pleasantries, and then Francisco leaves. Marcellus asks immediately if the thing that is the reason for Horatio's presence has already appeared, and he is told no. Marcellus goes on to mention Horatio's scoffing, saying that is why he has been invited. Horatio teases that the apparition won't appear. Bernardo asks him to sit and to listen while they tell him how they have seen this thing 2 nights running. Now, the first speech that is of interest to us is very short. It is the speech of Bernardo just as the ghost is entering. Bernardo says, "Last night of all, when yond same star that's westward from the pole has made his course to illumine that part of heaven where now it burns, Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating 1, and at that point they are interrupted by the entrance of the ghost." Now this seems to be saying this is the way we tell time. We see that star over there rose and came to its prominence, and it's lighting the sky. But that's something really interesting. Most likely that star is right overhead, right at the midheaven, at the 10th house. Such a star is called a latitude star. A latitude star is the star that, with its celestial declination exactly equal to its geographical latitude at a given place on the earth. And usually latitude stars are important to places, usually a city, and usually a ruling city, and whoever rules that city. The philosophy in ancient times, right into medieval and Renaissance times, that such a star, even if it was faint in its incidental influence, by continuously passing overhead at right angles directly above, at the zenith, the influence is, even if faint, strong enough by being etched again and again, day after day, night after night, to affect the temperament and the character of the residents of that place. Kings and other divine rulers were the living center of the people. As the king went, so went the people. So a latitude was called a king's star as much as it was a star of the people, especially if the star was directly overhead when a king was born. In some senses, a latitude star was called a ruling star, but that's not quite exactly the way a ruling star works in astrology. It's sometimes a helpful thing to know what the latitudes are for your place of birth. But you have to have very accurate information about the time of birth, right down to the second. And you have to know your place of birth, right down to the exact longitude and latitude. if you want to see if there was at the time that you were born directly overhead at the zenith a star that would be your ruling star. It's a fascinating subject, especially if you apply it to geography and note various great cities that share common latitudes and what those latitudes have as attitudes of those cities. For us, it's a relatively simple task to, with a set of tables and a calculator, you can see whether a latitude star was exactly overhead at birth. In other times, it wasn't so easy. But to make it easy, star towers were built. A star tower is a cylindrical tower, usually with no windows, except at the very top, in the center of the roof, which was a slightly arched roof. At the center of that was a window or a portal. The Leaning Tower of Pisa was at one time such a tower, an astronomical tower. The idea was that if you are in a columnar space, that you're shielded from any light that come in from the side, and you have a sufficient distance of such a tubular shape. If you have a tower like that, or if you're in a well, or if you're in a mine at it, or if you are looking at the opening of the Great Pyramid, with sufficiently sensitive eyes, what can happen is that you can see a star in the daytime. And then you can know when the latitude star is directly overhead, whether it be night or day. And you know at what time approximately each day it will be exactly overhead. Because that is when important decisions are made, or that is when important events occur. Now, some scientists believe or don't believe this, but there have been people who have been able to, with sensitive enough eyes, to even be able to see in the daytime, to see bright stars, like first magnitude stars, or less than first magnitude stars. Caspar Hauser, supposedly, who was locked in a basement for most of his childhood, had such sensitive vision that he could see bright stars in the daytime, even without a tower. Thus, if the deceased king really was a king and now was a ghost, if he had been a true king, it's not at all unlikely that his ghost would be empowered by the ascendancy of the latitude star, the king's star. So they see it. And along about lines 46, Horatio does speak to it in the first of two speeches. Marcellus says to Horatio, "Speak to it, Horatio." Horatio says, "What art thou that usurpest this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak." Marcellus says, "It is offended." Bernardo says, "See, it walks away." Horatio says, "Stay, speak, speak. I charge thee, speak." The ghost leaves immediately upon being spoken to. This is spiritually correct. It is true to true ghostology. Once again, Shakespeare knows all about ghosts, and he proves it. We saw that when we looked at the ghost that appears in the tent in Julius Caesar. Now this is exactly what we would expect with such strong speech, and not one but two charges. Entities, if they are normal entities, have a very difficult time manifesting themselves to us. That is, if they are in the etheric subdivision of the physical world. If they're in the ethers. Fairies, for example, find the harsh, desire-filled aura of humans. They find that that the vibrations of the vital body are inimical to the very integrity of their being. And they are harmed, almost like being tased or something like that, which is why fairies usually can only appear to little children and not be offended by little children, because little children don't have that quality about them. For human ghosts, it's another matter. After the death of the physical body, all of the vehicles are unwinding, they're unspinning, and they're disintegrating. The will to live that set them spinning in the first place and drew together the stuff necessary for a life, that is all undoing itself now. Once the silver cord is snapped, this is what happened. So the etheric vehicle is the primary vehicle of a ghost. It's the first to go, but it's the one that's closest to this world and that can manifest in this world. It takes a strong will, and it takes some occult knowledge, practical occult knowledge, to bring it together and manifest the energy so that it can make itself impressed upon the world of the living. Now, if a charge from somebody that is anchored in the physical body is directed at such a spirit, it's capable of withering the etheric energy. And the thing to remember in such an encounter, even if you are not an exorcist but have some soul power about you and the skill to direct it, most of the newly dead spirits can be directed or fended off or kept away. Now, an earthbound spirit is a much different matter. It can be quite formidable because it has extensive occult knowledge, and it has stolen a lot of energy from a lot of living beings, including living human beings. So the ghost is not only one that shrinks at this encounter, so does Horatio. And we find that in the next area we read, which is lines 53 to 58. Marcellus says, "Is it not like the king?" And Horatio, "As thou art thyself." Such was the very armor he had on when he, the ambitious Norway, combated. So frowned he once when in the angry parle he smote the sledded Polacks on the ice. 'Tis strange. This sets Horatio off. He's marveling at what he has just seen. This is quite an experience. Horatio is unnerved by the interaction. This is the same Horatio that scoffed beforehand and actually had his bravery questioned. Now, this is not an uncommon thing to happen with somebody who sees a ghost. It's even expected. Many people, especially skeptics, fall apart on seeing a ghost or seeing something paranatural. It is because they are so it isn't because they are attacked by the ghost, but just because the ghost is there. It's because their belief system has been invalidated. What they believe in, this world, and what they take security in, this world, has been partially invalidated. It has been violated. And their spiritual being, which has been neglected in the materialism responsible for skepticism, in its weakness is now exposed, and they are afraid. In astrology, people with strong earthy sign tendencies are often fearful at the realization even of illness or death, because they have based so much of their value system, so much of their security in sensate things. They are also the ones that are most likely to be skeptical. Krishnamurti, and a mystic from India, is right in saying that people are not afraid of the unknown as much as they are afraid of losing the known. Horatio has just had the foundations of his known world shaken by new evidence that goes beyond his world where he has security. And he's afraid of losing the known to a world that can appear and disappear, and he's fearful. In the ensuing conversation, we're filled with the background circumstances of Denmark by these young noblemen talking with each other. They talk about the challenge of Fortinbras of Norway, which was answered by Hamlet, the prince who slays him. By the rules of noble warfare, all that he rules should be forfeit to Denmark for losing. But his son, the young Fortinbras, becomes renegade. Renegade to the rules, and he becomes something of a rogue adventurer, sort of like Hagar the Horrible in the comics, going around looting here and there. So he's attacking where he should have forfeited. This is why there is the strict guard. And this, speculates Horatio, is why the ghost is appearing. It is to warn. And the ghost does, at this point, reappear at the end of the speech. As we shall see, the speculation of Horatio is right in describing upcoming trouble for Denmark, but wrong about why the ghost appears. Skeptics usually do not have a good batting average when it comes to speculating. However, the interlude is more a device to fill in the audience about the state of things in Denmark as this play is taking place. Now, this obviously brings us to the subject of UFOs. It is said that nature abhors a vacuum, and it rushes into a vacuum to fill it. To the psyche, the unknown represents a vacuum. A vacuum it rushes in to fill. Almost it is compelled to fill it. And it fills it with perceptions often that are speculative of its own self-being. When I need to know someone or get to know someone in a hurry, I'll bring up the subject of UFOs. And usually, via a question that produces that vacuum, the people that I'm trying to get to know fill that vacuum with their character. And you can see right off where they're coming from. If you say, what do you think about UFOs? and somebody says they're in the instrument of the devil, you know right where that person is coming from. And with that unknown, they feel that they must fill that unknown with their character. It's amazing how someone will speculatively project their unseen character into the void of an unknown. I can remember an incident in riding home from an experiment I worked for science, and we had an experiment in the Chicago area. And after a long stay, we were driving back home to Madison, Wisconsin, and I didn't want the trip to get boring and fall asleep at the wheel. So I turned to the grad student next to me, whose name was Bill, and I said, Bill, have you seen any UFOs recently? And from the back seat, an associate scientist immediately barks out, there are no UFOs. If there were, they would appear to the intelligentsia, meaning him. Needless to say, it was a lively ride all the way home. Every now and then I find myself in a circumstance where I find that really helpful. In our play, the question is, why is this unknown phenomenon, this apparition, appearing? And so it too attracts speculation. It attracted already, as we have seen, the speculation of Horatio. In any case, the statement of Horatio just before the reappearance of the ghost is beautifully eloquent, and it must be read, even though he is wrong. A mote it is to trouble the mind's eye in the most high and palmy state of Rome. A little ere the mightiest Julius fell, the graves stood tenantless, and the sheeted dead did squeak and gibber in the Roman streets, as stars with trains of fire and dews of blood, disasters in the sun and the moist star, upon whose influence Neptune's empire stands, was sick almost to doomsday with eclipse, and even the like precurse of feared events as harbingers preceding still the fates, and prolong the omen coming on, have heaven and earth together demonstrated unto our climatures and countrymen. Of course, Skeptic sure knows a lot about the things of nature that happened before the slaying of Julius Caesar. When we studied Julius Caesar, we discussed the occult fact that most ghosts and etheric entities and specters couldn't hold together visibly in the ethers when the ethers are excited by direct sunlight. There's too much energy there, and they vibrate. The light vibrates differently. Even physicists, in their own arcane way of describing things or explaining things, would not disagree with this, that there is a great difference in the makeup of the atmosphere in sunlight versus in nighttime. Now, the ghost of Hamlet's father is no exception, and it leaves at the crow of the cock, indicating the impending light of a new day. This truth is again stated along with a lot of other light lore, though some of it is questionable. It's stated so beautifully in the interaction between Horatio and Marcellus. We have to read it. There's just such beautiful stuff in here that we have to read a lot of it. Barnardo said, "It was about to speak when the cock crew." Horatio says, "And then it started like a guilty thing upon a fearful summons. I have heard the cock, that is the trumpet to the morn, doth with his lofty and shrill-sounding throat awake the god of day, and at his warning whether in sea or fire, in air or earth, the extravagant and erring spirit hies to his confine, and of the truth herein this present object made probation. Marcellus says, it faded on the crowing of the cock. Some day that ever against the season comes, wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated, this bird dawning singeth all night long, and then they say, no spirit dare stir abroad. The nights are wholesome when no planets strike, no fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and so gracious is that time. So have I heard, and do in part believe it. But look, the morn, in russet mantle clad, walks o'er the dew of yon high eastward hill. Break we our watch up, and by my advice let us impart what we have seen tonight unto young Hamlet, for upon my life this spirit dumb to us will speak to him. Do you consent? We shall acquaint him with it, as needfully our lies fitting our duty. Marcellus says, let's do it, I pray, and I this morning know where we shall find him most convenient. Lovely poetry. The acts of planetary grace may be more available at sunrise, as suggested by the speech and by others at other times, but they have to be requested to be received. We ask for grace. We ask for forgiveness. All right, let's move on to Act 1, Scene 2. Act 1, Scene 2 opens with a flourish, and the new king, Claudius, enters. He speaks with royal language, which is difficult, but we'll try reading it. The royals always speak in a higher tongue than the commoners, and for people who are not good readers like myself, that is difficult, because these are the people that you most want to listen to. King says, though yet of Hamlet our dear brother's death the memory be green, and that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. Yet so far hath discretion wrought with nature, that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves. Therefore out sometime, sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere, with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and dropping eye, with mirth in funeral and dirge in marriage, in equal scale weighing delight in dole taken to wife. Nor have we herewith barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along. For all our thanks now follows, that you, young Fortinbras, holding a weak supposal of our worth, or thinking by our late dear brother's death our state will be disjoint and out of frame, colleagued with this dream of his advantage, he hath not failed to pester us with message importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father with all the bands of law to our most valiant brother. So much for him. Now for ourselves, for this time of meeting, this much the business is, we have writ to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, who, impotent and bedrid, scarcely hears of his nephew's purpose, to suppress his further gait herein, in that the levies, the lists and full proportions are all made out of his subject, and we here dispatch you, good Cornelius, and you, Vodemand, for bearers of this greeting to old Norway, giving to you no further personal power to business with the king more than the scope of these delated articles allow. Farewell, let you haste and commend your duty. Not necessarily beautiful, but really quite a mouthful. He tells us the same information that Horatio did in scene 1. But it is different. It is very different how it comes across. And it isn't just because he's speaking with the royal tongue of the king. When Horatio charged the ghost and speculated about the reason for its presence, it was all guy talk. It was among equals. Claudius makes pronouncements, pompous pronouncements. He is posturing, and he's interpreting the recent events in Denmark. He's even proclaiming them in the way that he wants them to be seen. It is the way kings do things. This is not something new to Claudius. In Egypt, when a new dynasty entered in, there were actually even recensions of history of what had happened in the past, and there were recensions of the myths. So Claudius is something like what we would call a spin doctor, a royal spin doctor dressing up with the sordid fact of the combined wedding and funeral, the funeral of his brother and the wedding of his wife. He dispatches the two courtiers to Cornelius and Vodaman. He dispatches them to Norway, to the king, asking them to rein in young Fortinbras. He then turns to young Laertes, the son of Polonius, who was his chamberlain, and asks him what is his suit. And Laertes says he has done his duty, he has come home for the coronation, but now he would like to return to France to go to school. The king asks Polonius what he wants, and Polonius says he has been convinced that it is the best thing, and requests that Laertes be granted leave to go back to France. And the king addresses Hamlet, and he addresses him as son, no less. Hamlet soliloquizes as sort of an aside with a sharp rejoinder. Let's look and see what we have here. King says, "Take thy fair hour, Laertes, time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will. But now, my cousin Hamlet, and my son," Hamlet says, "a little more than kin, and less than kind." King says, "How is it the clouds still hang on you?" Hamlet says, "Not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun." Making a play on the word sun. The queen doesn't get it. She is, "Hamlet, cast off thy nighted color, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common that all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity." And Hamlet says, "Aye, man, it is common," but he means something more other by the common than she does. The king, let's see, all right. There are, in all relationship structures, there are barriers and limitations built in. It is necessary that a mother be a mother and treat her child as a child, because childhood, because of the barriers of this, neither the mother nor the child knows each other as just as a human being. They have this penned in or this walled in relationship. To some extent, every child is a universal child, and in that it is known as the universal child, but not as itself, which is not yet manifest. This is because birth does not begin with the first breath, or it isn't over at the first breath. It is a progressive activity. Every 7 years, something new is awakened or is born in our individuality. At age 7, our etheric vital body is born, and thus commences the period of rapid growth. And there are certain characteristics that a child has that before belong to the world. The proportions of the becoming individual are changed with the new growth. At 14, the desire body is born, and a person is a romantic, subject to all of the feelings without restraint. Near 21, the mind is born, and the person is then a person of thought. And these are all the vehicles that we have. The physical is born at the physical birth, and then the etheric or the vital existence that we have at 7, the emotions at 14, and at 21 the mind. But it usually isn't until around 28 that the self is born. If someone is lucky enough from their past evolution to awaken up in self, to have what is called the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and to know themselves as a divine being. Until each of these unique vehicles is born, the child lives in the more macrocosmic vehicle. Before age 7, the child lives in the energy of the earth, so to speak, and not in the individual vital body. And the same thing before 14 with the feelings and emotions. And hence, children have an archetypal kind of consciousness. And the unique individuality is unknown. Now, the mother, especially, or any other family member who is familiar with the child, can recognize the archetype that is behind the life and the bodies, even though the individuality hasn't come into its own yet. The character pattern is there, but it's acted out with a certain amount of universality. And this is what someone like Gertrude, the mother of Hamlet, sees. She's perennially a mother. I can remember in myself, after I came into my own, and after I became an individual in my late 20s, and was reunited with my parents, they didn't know me, because I was different. My mother could see the same pattern, the same archetype of behavior, but there was something that went beyond that. And that actually led her to mysticism in seeing that the pattern is just the pattern and that there's something more beyond the pattern. So it takes a lot of readjustment in a relationship. And it takes a lot of recognition to see one human as another human. Otherwise, we're stuck in the conventions of relationship. In some societies, it's more rigid than in others. In pre-communist China, the relationship of even an older brother to the second brother was all defined. You couldn't see an individual as an individual. You saw them within the social structure of relationships that was convention or that was prescribed by society. Now, often we find that the readjustment from being the child or being the brother or whatever it is to being friends there often has to be a rebellion. But even with rebellion, sometimes the recognition doesn't come because of the extremely set idea that we have about people. My father, on the other hand, it took him quite a few years to recognize me for what I am. For a while, he still, to his dying day, still called me son and would not always call me by my name. But as he got older and we spent a lot of time together, he would ask me friend to friend about what I thought about things. And it took a lot of rebellion and a lot of hard years before that came about. So only when the parental relationship or other kind of filial relationship can be broken down and all individuals involved can readjust to a relationship of friendship, only then can we see others as they are. And only then can there be mutual appreciation. Anyway, Hamlet replies with another clever remark, and that is a clever remark that is, once again, not picked up by anybody. Hamlet is a very, very clever man, very intelligent man. And his mother asks him why it seems particular with him. And his reply at line 74 is something we want to read. His mother says, "If it be, why seems it so particular with thee?" Hamlet says, "Seems, madam, nay, it is. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river of the eye, nor the dejected behavior of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief, that can denote me truly. These indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play, but I have within which passes show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe." Hamlet's speeches are really beautiful. I think of all of Shakespeare, who has contributed more to the Oxford English Dictionary than anyone else, more words in the English language come from Shakespeare than anywhere else, though the Bible has quite a few. But of all of the words that are given by Shakespeare, more come from Hamlet than from any other source. And of them, the speeches of Hamlet are where they come from. That's implied that there may be a lack of sincerity in the court, a seeming sorrow. Hamlet is keenly aware not only of the fact that his mother doesn't know him, as is often the case, he's also keenly aware of the fact that he knows her when she doesn't. So he's also aware that his mother is blocked from knowing him and from knowing others because she's locked in and she's blinded by the fact that she is a queen. And the relationship or the identity of being a queen is something that she has her security in and she knows herself in, and it's been so many years that she can't see herself any other way. This may even be why she married so quickly after the death of her husband, because then she would continue to be herself, continue to be a queen. Hamlet is obviously keenly insightful. He's somebody that penetrates the appearances. To this very beautiful statement by Hamlet, the king gives an answer. "'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these mourning duties to your father, but you must know your son lost a father, that father lost his, and the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow, but to persevere in obstinate condolement is a course of impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven, a heart unfortified, a mind impatient, an understanding simple and unschooled for what we know must be and is as common as any most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? Fie, 'tis a fault to heaven, a fault against the dead, a fault to nature, to reason most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers, who still cried from the first course till what he died today, this must be so. We pray you, throw to earth this unprevailing woe, and think of us as a father, for let the world take note you are the most immediate to our throne, and with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. For your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde to our desire, and we beseech you, bend you to remain here in the cheer and comfort of our eye, the chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son. Oh, what hypocrisy. He tells them basically he isn't a man, tells them he isn't a prince, he's being a weak woman. It's really hypocrisy. The real reason he wants him to stay around the corner so he can keep an eye on him. So, because he's afraid that the Hamlet will do the same thing to him that he did to his brother. We don't even need to say much of the fact that the king, though he's speaking kingly, is insolent. He's interpreting Hamlet's life, and nobody needs to interpret someone else's life. That's why we're here. We're here to understand our life, to live our life, and through that come into being. Shakespeare doesn't spare the irony that Claudius says he knows it when it is obvious that he doesn't. He really doesn't know this. He doesn't do this just with clowns. He does this with serious people. Hamlet can see that they can't see, and he will try to obey and stay home from college at Wittenberg, and the king responds with his obvious ignorance. And all leave at this point but Hamlet, and he's prone to giving soliloquies to himself alone, gives them out loud, probably because he is lonely. Let's read that. It's at line 129. Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. He's already thinking of suicide. O God, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it, ah, fie, 'tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely, that it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2, so excellent a king that was to this, Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not between the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth, must I remember? Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman. A month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body like Niobe, all tears. Why she, even she, O God, a beast that wants discourse of reason, would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married, O most wicked speed to post, with such dexterity to incestuous sheets, it is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, I must hold my tongue. Wowee. It must be wonderful to talk like that. There are some people that do it even without reading lines in a play. I just don't want to comment on such a glorious speech, and so the only thing I'll say that Shakespeare, whoever he may have been, must surely have been a gardener, because only a gardener could realize the power of the metaphor of the garden gone to seed, a rank and weedy garden. At any rate, at this point, Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo enter, and Hamlet is immediately the friend and enjoys them. He asks Horatio why he is home from Wittenberg and promises to drink with him ere he returns. Horatio says when he returned for the king's funeral. And Hamlet chides him and says, no, it must have been for his mother's wedding. And Horatio agrees that they were pretty close in time. And Hamlet replies with another famous sardonic speech in his amazing penetration of wit. He actually startles Horatio. Let's look at that. That's 180 to 189. Horatio said, indeed, my lord, it followed hard upon, speaking about the wedding after the funeral. Hamlet says, thrift, Horatio, the funeral baked meats did coldly furnish forth the marriage tables. Would I had met my dearest foe in heaven, or ever I had seen that day, Horatio. My father, methinks I see my father. And this is what blows Horatio away. His mind has just been read. Hamlet has changed the subject to his father. And that's pretty remarkable. It's the first instance. We'll see other instances of the play that Hamlet is something akin to a mind reader. All right, from time to time we have spoken about the psychology of humor. We have mentioned that we often laugh when we experience relief about something that we were previously anxious about. The humor of Hamlet is no exception to this principle. One of my favorite comedians is Mort Saul. He is an exceedingly intelligent man. At one time he was a math grad student at the University of California in Berkeley. However, his humor is keen not because of intellectual subtlety, though that sometimes enters into the delivery. His humor is keen because of his shrewd observations. He sees things as they are, exactly as they are, in peculiar and very prosaic circumstances. And he describes them plainly, undressed, without any of that fancy language that the king uses. He just puts them in common language. And when that is juxtaposed with all of the pretensions and the assumptions and the other misunderstandings that surround events, it seems humorous. It's the juxtaposition. We are relieved of our tensions about the way they are presented, about the way things are presented by the world. The consequence of seeing undressed moments of truth amidst all the foibles of humanity is ironic. It's ironic humor, and it's the humor of Hamlet. Destiny is ironic. We get exactly what we need, when we need it, and how we need it. And destiny is unglossed truth. We can laugh at it if we're unattached and if we're not self-important, and that makes it all the funnier. Sometimes there are things that happen in life that grief or sorrow or any other emotion can't relieve. But if we laugh at the reality of it, that it is, there's something in its existential being that laughing can relieve like no other emotion can. It's humorous when we ourselves are caught in our follies, and it's a great relief. It's poetic justice, but it hurts, but it's good. The humor of Hamlet is ironic. It has that same shrewd observation of things exactly as they are. But Hamlet's humor is more than that. Even more than the double entendres like he just used with the sun, S-O-N and S-U-N. It has a sharp edge, and it is bitter, and it is sardonic. This is because he not only sees things as they are, he does not like the things that he sees. He can see them and it's funny, but he doesn't like what he's seeing because he has an ideal. He can see things as they should be, not as people would like them to be or dress them up or posture in them. He has a personal dislike of some things of reality. He's already told us he's world weary. As clear as his vision is, he doesn't like what he sees and he doesn't want to accept what he sees. This is an idealist. He doesn't want to struggle or fight with reality either. He knows better. He knows that if he fought with reality rather than accepting it and working with and through it, he would be ensnared by it. This attitude that he has will grow throughout the play, the acceptance of destiny and seeing what can be done within that acceptance. So we can see that he's an idealist, even in a lofty sense. But he's also a little bit jaded and world-weary, and the combination comes out bitter. He's not penned in by relational blindness like his mother is. To some extent she is. And he's not penned in by his mentality, at least not too much. He's penned in by his thoughts, and we'll find that grows throughout the play also. He sees things clearly, and he does struggle with that. So while being a prisoner of his own wit, it's not surprising that he is the kind of person that talks to himself. He doesn't have anybody else. He doesn't have a peer that he can talk with. He has the harsh irony of unfulfilled struggle. And there's a tinge of cynicism that comes with incomplete idealism or partially abandoned idealism. You might say that he's somebody like someone that has a Mercury in Scorpio or Mars square Mercury or something like that. It's brutal, but it's really sharp. All right. Once Hamlet has sensed his friend's consciousness, read his mind, it's easier for him to turn the conversation to where it needs to go. Hamlet draws out of him the story of the ghost. He actually states that he saw it. Friendship is probably of all our relationships the most unencumbered. It's probably the most expansive. It's also the most open relationship. You can be completely open in friendship. So telepathy is likely in it, but not for the same reason that there is telepathy in marriage. In marriage, there is intimacy. There's actually the etheric bond that comes with sexual intercourse, so that vital bodies are blended into one being. And with that, telepathy is likely. But with the telepathy that takes place in friendship is because of the openness. We're not guarded. And we're open to give, and we're open to receive the thoughts of another through the ethers. You know, it's interesting to note that Horatio is not shaken by the mind reading of Hamlet. That's because it's all part of friendship. And one doesn't question anything in friendship. When Hamlet knows the history of the sightings of his father's ghost, he resolves to be there that night. And he's savvy, and so he has all of his friends swear to be silent of the matter, and then they leave. Again, when he's alone, he gives voice to his intuitive suspicion about the meaning of this extraordinary phenomenon, and his suspicion is much more accurate and intuitive than that of Horatio. Let's see what he says. Your love's as mine to you, farewell, and then they leave. Hamlet says, my father's spirit in arms, all is not well. See, he got all the details. I doubt some foul play. Would the night were come. Till then, sit still, my soul. Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes. He's got a suspicion of what is in the air. That's as far as we'll go with this, and next time we'll continue on, and it won't go any faster because this is as rich as it gets in Shakespeare, so we'll take our time and enjoy ourselves with it. Thank you.